everyone and welcome back to my channel. We are nearing the end of 2023, which means we are going to be talking about my top 23 books of 2023. I have separated them all into genres. We have fantasy, romance, and then literary fiction. They're my kind of three main genres, but without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start out with literary fiction because that is the smallest pile, consisting of literally 2 books. The first book is technically a true crime fiction, and that is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. Now, I absolutely love this book. I read this only recently and I was absolutely blown away. This was such a moving, emotional read and one of my top reads of the entire year, like up the top. This is a true crime fiction because it is actually based off a true crime case, but the characters that we're following have more fictional substance to them. But the facts in this book are completely true. Everything you read about is just heartbreakingly true. In this book, we are following a victim from the Ted Bundy case. She was a witness to one of his most horrific crimes, and it follows her having to accept the loss of a lot of her friends and having to face him in court, because if you are familiar with the case, Ted Bundy represented himself in court. Not a good idea, but he did it. It gives you such a new perspective on true crime, and I think that was really, really refreshing for me. Rather than just getting told the facts, you're looking at it through the victim's point of view. The only other literary fiction book on this list is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Obviously, this book just took the internet by storm. This was such an incredible read. I did really like it. It wasn't a 5 stars for me, it was a 4 stars, but I did still really enjoy it a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's kind of hard to explain what this book is about, and I feel like that's why I put it off for so long. Also, it's just not my typical genre, so I thought I was going to get bored in it, but I didn't. I was so instantly connected to these characters, and you feel like you know these characters in real life. It's such a magical connection that only very few books have actually achieved. We are basically following Sadie and Sam. They are childhood friends. They have kind of this trauma bond going on. And then they don't see each other for years and years. And then they meet again in college and they decide to build a video game together. Just the connection between our characters, and it really explored really prevalent issues of friendships and relationships. And I think it was really realistic and raw, and I really loved the way it was written. Moving on to romance, I'm going to start off with the Knockmount series by Lucy Score. I read this entire series this year and it was so much fun. It's a small town romance series and we're following different couples in each book. So there's kind of this sense of found family you gain once you've read the entire series. I just love the town that this is set in. I grew up in a small town, so it's kind of reminiscent for me, and I just love small town romances. This is a Grumpy Sunshine book. This entire series, I don't think I've mentioned, but in this video I'm going to be counting series as one. I'm not going to be saying my favorite books from each series, just if I mention the series, I'm talking about the whole series. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about the entire series. I actually love the entire series. It was so much fun. Highly, highly recommend. Magnolia Parks. So I read the first 2 books in the end of last year, and I continued the series this year with A Long Way Home and Daisy Hates the Great Undoing. I am obsessed. I love this series more than anything, and if you're a fan of this series, you know that the 5th one is coming out on February 13th, and I am so excited. But also, this is the last book from Magnolia and BJ's perspective, which I don't know how I feel. I'm so scared. I don't want this to end. I love this book. This is, if you don't know, Magnolia Parks is very Gossip Girl set in London. We are following a rich found family, big friend group. They all have very strong personalities. Magnolia is a very little spoiled kind of girl, but is iconic. She's very Blair. BJ is her kind of fated partner, but there's all these reasons that they can't really be together. They're just very toxic, not great for each other. And then we're following numerous other characters. I am obsessed with this series. I love this series so much. Happy Place by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry's books. I've read Beach Read and Book Lovers and absolutely loved both of them, so obviously I had to read Happy Place as soon as it came out, and it did not disappoint. For some reason this just hit all the right spots, and I was crying in this book, and I didn't expect to. It just touched on such prevalent topics. It really explored the nature of friendship and as you get older with your friendships, how they're going to develop, how they might fade away, and the importance of this, and I thought it was just so well done. I just love that Emily Henry writes such fun, heartwarming chick flicks, but includes such prevalent issues that you really relate to. She does it like no one else, what can I say? One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I am obsessed with Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read every single book she's ever wrote. I love her writing. I love the way she develops characters. I think she's so amazing, and One True Loves was no exception. This was actually the last book I read of hers. All her other books I read last year. Obsessed with One True Loves. I just thought it really looked at love in a very different way, in a very realistic, a raw way. She's very known for doing that. None of her books are happy sunshine all the time. Like, they deal with heartbreak, they deal with expanding relationships, they deal with evolving relationships. Like, it is so great, and I just love the way she communicates this. Windy City series by Liz Tomford. Now, this is a sports romance series, again with a lot of found family in it. In the first book, we are following a ice hockey player, in the second book, a basketball player, and in the third book, a baseball player. And I believe there is a fourth book coming out. And I love this series, and I did not expect to. It is so addictive. Just the main male protagonists are amazing. The main female protagonists are also different from each other, and they have such strong, shining personalities that I just absolutely loved. Highly recommend this series. It's, again, one of my favorite romances of the year just because it's so much fun and so addictive. I think arguably this is my favorite series of the entire year. This series I am so emotionally connected to. I have bawled my eyes out, I've laughed, I felt every emotion while reading this series, and it is my everything. And that is the Boys of Tottenham series by Chloe Walsh. So we have Finding and Keeping 13, which are the first two books in the series following Shannon and Johnny, and then we have Saving and Redeeming 6, and they're following Shannon's sister Joey and his girlfriend Eve, or Aoife. I've heard different ways of pronouncing it. I have never felt heartbreak like I have whilst reading these books. Definitely look up trigger warnings before reading this. It deals with very strong topics, and I think it's very good to go into it knowing that, because I went in not knowing that, and it didn't affect me too much, but I can imagine that it would affect a lot of people. The fact that these books are really long, you literally speed through them. It feels like you're watching a movie or something. I could not put these books down when I was reading them. Saving and Redeeming 6 were the exact same. I love them so much. If you don't know, these books are an Irish sports romance. So in the first book, we're following Johnny, who is a rugby player. He meets Shannon. Shannon is just a very small, shy girl, and then their relationship develops from there. He is such an incredible boyfriend. He is the best book boyfriend. And then in Saving 6, we are following Shannon's brother Joey. He has kind of had the job of raising all his younger siblings, because his parents are not present in that sense. And the way he deals with this is through a lot of substance abuse. You follow his journey through addiction, but also his journey in falling in love and accepting self-love. It's such an emotional story, and I love it so much. And Joey is a hurling player. It's just the best series I have ever read. Moving on to fantasy. Fantasy was like my main genre this year, obviously. So we're going to start out with Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Now, I have only read the first book and the second book in this series, and I cannot wait to finish it, but I am obsessed with it. It is so beautifully written. I love like fantasy games as well, and I feel like she executed it in such a beautiful way. Caraval is basically set in a magical land where they have this game called Caraval. It is like a maze, and once you enter, you are told that nothing is real. Our main protagonist's sister goes missing, and she believes she has been brought to Caraval, so our main protagonist has to compete in Caraval in order to find her sister. It is just so amazing, and I am obsessed with Stephanie Garber's universe. And talking about Stephanie Garber's universe, Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Now, this is my favorite fantasy series of the year. I am absolutely obsessed with this series. I love every single character in this. I just thought this world is so magical and fantastical. It feels like you're reading a fairy tale. I have annotated this to shreds. Like, I love this series so much. In Once Upon a Broken Heart, we are following our main protagonist, Evangeline. The love of her life is getting married to her stepsister, and she wants to stop this. She feels like he is under a curse, that he doesn't know what he's consciously doing. So she makes a deal with a fate. Now, these fate are kind of people that people warn you off. They are dangerous people. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to trick you, but they do have magical powers. She makes a deal with the fate called Jax, and he stops this wedding, but in return for 3 kisses anytime, anywhere. It is a very basic premise, and it expands so much beyond that. Like, the way that this series develops is just insane. Like, I would do anything to read this series for the first time. So if you haven't, consider yourself very lucky. Serpent and the Wings of Night by Sarah Broadbent. Now, I will say I love Serpent and the Wings of Night, but wasn't big on the novella and the second book in this series. I absolutely love this book. It is a vampire romance, again, magical game aspect. Our protagonist is basically competing in a vampire game, and if you win this game, you get a gift from like kind of the magical power in this world, and she wants to become a vampire. She is a human in a vampire world, and as you can imagine, that doesn't go down too well. She wants to be as strong and as cunning and just at the same level as all these vampires around her. It is so much fun, and it definitely talks about vampires in a very different way than I'm used to. I just feel like it was just such a fun time. I just had such a fun, addictive time reading that book. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book was so much fun. The banter in this was amazing. The chemistry between our characters was amazing. We are set in a world where there are elites and ordinaries. Elites are people with special powers, magical powers, and ordinaries are basic people. Ordinaries are usually executed or outcast. Our main protagonist is posing as an elite. She's pretending to be a psychic so that she can stay alive, basically. Our main male protagonist is a prince, and he is actually elite. This book is amazing, and I can't wait for the rest of the series to come out. There's also a magical game aspect to it. It's very Hunger Games, but add magic. And a little bit more banter between the characters. That's what it gives me, and it is so addictive. If you're in a reading slump, this book. A Darker Shade of Magic by V. Schwab. I love this book, and I've only read the first book in this series. It is a 3-book series, but I was instantly obsessed with the characters. I love Kel, I love Delilah. It was just such a unique magical world. Basically, we are following our protagonist Kel. He is a traveler. He can travel between the different realities of London. So in this book, we have various realities of London. We have the White London, the Grey London, the Black London, and the Red London. And Kel kind of travels between these realities. He is one of very few that can keep political peace, basically, between the realities. It is such a cool premise, and it just develops so much from there. And I honestly cannot wait to continue this series. Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, or The Final Empire. This is the first book in the Mistborn series, and I love Brandon Sanderson's writing. I've only read the first book, and I cannot wait to continue this series. He's just such an incredible world builder. Brandon Sanderson has a very unique ability to build such an intricate, complicated, but understandable world that just is unlike anything I've ever read. Mistborn is like a heist story. We're set in a world where the bad guy has already won. So it's kind of past ever after, if that makes sense. I've said it once and I'll say it again. He is just the king of fantasy. He has such a unique way of creating characters and creating interconnected series that just blows my mind. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I only recently read this and I am so glad I did. I cannot wait to read the second book in this series. This was so much fun. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. I'm obsessed with the world. That was what got me. The world is just incredible, and basically they use tarot cards or oracle cards as a magic system. Like if you possess a card with a certain ability, that ability transfers into you and you can kind of project it, if that makes sense. And just the love story in this was so good as well. I am actually obsessed and cannot wait to read the second book in this series. I will say I gave it a 4.5 stars just because I feel like there could have been a little bit more chemistry between our main characters, but apart from that, absolutely obsessed. I read pretty much the entire Throne of Glass series this year apart from the last book, but I must say my favorite book was definitely Queen of Shadows. I just love the character development in it. It was just so much fun. I really like this series. I'm not a mega fan like everyone else is. I definitely enjoy it, but I'm not like on the edge of my seat while reading every book. But again, I'm definitely going to finish it. Like, I love it. And Queen of Shadows was just so great. Gates by Marissa Meyer. This is a YA sci-fi book, and I had never read a YA sci-fi book before. Honestly, don't read a lot of sci-fi, so I've just kind of included it in the fantasy category. But I really enjoyed this book. It was just so fast-paced, so addictive, and it just it made you feel like a child reading this book again. Not in the sense that it's a childish book. It is very much an any age limit book, but so great. We are basically set in a world where there are people called renegades. They're kind of like superhero-like type figures. Our main protagonist has a reason to hate these renegades, and she goes undercover to kind of undo their political system from the inside out. It is so good and so addictive. Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is a Norse myth inspired fantasy, so the world we are set in has a lot of Norse myth inspired elements, and that was something I had never read before. I loved it for that reason. This is a high fantasy book, so definitely go in knowing that. There is little to no romance, but the plot makes up for it. It is such a good plot. I did annotate it. There were just so many like incredible descriptions in this book. The characters are amazing. It is a multiple POV and is literally just action, and then leaving you on cliffhangers and going to another character's point of view, and for that reason it keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I really enjoyed this and definitely want to read more of John Gwynne's works. Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. This is the last book in the Last Hours trilogy. I'm obsessed with the Last Hours trilogy. Read the first 2 books last year, so obviously, and then this book came out at the beginning of this year, and so obviously I read it straight away and was so happy with it. Just this entire series, there is something about it that I just love the characters. I'm obsessed with the world, and just the love triangle in this keeps me on my toes. I cannot tell you how much I love these characters and how much they feel like they are my friends, like that I know them. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. The second book in this series comes out in like 2 weeks and I am so excited. This book took me by surprise. Obviously it is very popular everywhere on Book Talk, BookTube, everything, and I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but I was obsessed. This is an academic rivals to lovers, and we are set in a fantastical world, but our main protagonists don't actually have any fantastical abilities. But despite that fact, it is so addictive. The chemistry between our characters is unlike anything I've ever read, and probably the reason I love this book so much. I'm actually obsessed with this book and cannot wait to read the sequel. And also annotate this book in advance, annotate it. There are so many beautiful quotes. And Rebecca Ross's writing is just so lyrical and so beautiful. Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare, again another Cassandra Clare book. This is actually her new release, and this isn't related to her Shadowhunters world. So if you're familiar with Cassandra Clare, you know she wrote like the entire Shadowhunter universe. But this isn't related to it at all. This is an entirely new universe getting set up, and this book very much felt like a setup. Like we were getting so much detail about the world we're set in, about our characters, backstories to our characters, like really just getting to know everything, but I loved every second of it. She just has such descriptive writing in this, and I really liked seeing Cassandra Clare's works and characters in an adult fantasy setting. Like, I feel like they just gave them a lot more depth. This is also a great book to listen on audiobook. I only listened to like a few chapters in the middle on audiobook, but it was really great. Dance of Thieves by Mary Pearson, one of my favorite fantasy romances I read this year. Amazing enemies to lovers. It is full of wit. It is full of banter. It is so good. Again, not necessarily a very magical world, but just kind of has magical elements in it. I will forever be recommending this book. I love Dance of Thieves so much. I actually want to reread and annotate it all because I loved it that much. And this is the first in a duology. Amazing series. Mary Pearson is an absolute artist. And finally, House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Honestly, this book felt like a warm hug. Like, it was so comforting, so loving, so heartwarming. It was so beautifully written. This is basically about a social worker who goes to check up on a magical orphanage. This is an orphanage that keeps kids who have magical abilities, and it's kind of seen as in like society. This is very much Peregrine's, like Miss Peregrine's Home of Peculiar Children, very much this vibe, except this is very heartwarming. I really enjoyed it. Such an easy, beautiful, like mindless read. And again, just so heartwarming. That brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I can't believe we are at the end of 2023 already. I've had such an incredible reading year, and I really hope you have too. Subscribe if you're new. I would love to see you in the future, and thank you so much for watching today's video.